Welcome to GESScast. Tune in and listen as we speak to global education experts about the latest trends, challenges, and stories that matter. Hello, and a big welcome to Bathsheba Smithen, an international motivational speaker, radio personality, performing artist, author, educational consultant, English teacher, and the CEO and founder of Cage-Free Voices, LLC, an international multi-service educational entertainment company that educates youth and young adults who struggle with self-image and identity by constructing powerful learning experiences. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. So for those of our audience who aren't familiar with you and your work, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, so just like a little bit about who I am, and then I'll segue into talking about Cage-Free Voices and how the two converge. I grew up in a very impoverished environment. Had some struggles with my identity because I didn't have representation from both sides of my family. I grew up with a single mother. I have 8 siblings. So it's, just a lot. We learned a lot from each other. But through the experience of not being claimed by my own father, I had to, prop up my existence with a lie for, the duration of my childhood all the way up until, the time I go off to college. And it's through my time in college that I start to become liberated and I felt free to start, disclosing to people parts of who I am or who I was at that time, because I think we all, evolve. And so who I was yesterday is not the same as who I am today. Some vital components still remain, but and the essence of my being is still the same, but that evolution has taken place. And so with that identity crisis and not being able to discuss who my father was, and then also noting the differences in how I would, study certain subjects, I combined all of that to, come up with like this educational entertainment company, because I started to note, once I started to get into the workplace and working with students, that a lot of students had identity issues themselves. And with the current culture in which we live, many of the students like performing arts. And so I took all of that, Cage-Free Voices is me, and it's not easy to be cage-free. And a lot of people think, to be cage-free means to do whatever you want, but to be cage-free is to be all of who God has created you to be, which is a direct reflection of his glory. So sometimes doing what you want is like a direct result of some bondage you've previously experienced. And so becoming cage-free is not an easy process, because you have to be honest about who you are. You have to, get rid of some of the dead weight that kind of held you down in the past. And I went through that process, and I'm still going through that process. And Cage-Free Voices online learning not only introduces students to the academics that they need in order for them to succeed, but in addition, it helps them with their purpose. And I guess we'll get to that later on in the interview. But all of that coalesces, and it is a reflection of my own experiences. And I think that it helps me to readily connect with a lot of the students around the globe.
Great. And I mean, obviously, I read out quite a long list of projects and roles that you take. What are you working on at the moment? What initiatives are you currently working on?
So right now, our focus is innovative thinking and creativity when it comes to curriculum development, because we have gotten used to coming from one lens and one perspective when it comes to, building out academic content for students, when we need to be building students in a way that promotes holistic development. And so I'm challenging, our team of content developers, because prior to them coming on, I was developing a lot of the content. When you first start your company, you're like the butcher, the baker, everything else. So I'm glad that I can, take some of that off of my plate, and with the content developers, stretching them to start to think about not just the academic component, but also looking at transformative education. How can we use content to transform? Sorry, my headphones keep falling. How can we use, I got a lot of hair up here. But how can we use what we know about ourselves, and not even just in the process of developing our students, but how can I, as a transformational leader, in the changes that I make, allow for that change to occur with the people on my team, and consequently that kind of transition into the transformation that will happen with students, with our learning partners, because we don't say parents, because not all students have their parents, but it's transformative education. How can our content transform lives and also help people with their purpose? And so we've been seeing a lot of different reactions to students being involved in the Cage-Free Voices online learning program that we have available.
Brilliant. I mean, I had to look at your the bio you sent through, and one of the things that sort of struck me was the quote you say, where you say she spends most of her time training teachers and empowering young women to see themselves, even if the world is blind. I think that's an extremely powerful statement. So could you share some of the tips or advice you give people to sort of empower themselves?
Well, I think we try to see ourselves through the lens of other people, and that's where we need to kind of backtrack and begin starting the process of really seeing ourselves through our own eyes and what we know to be true. I'm actually in the process of self-discovery because you become confined to the expectations and the opinions of other people, and you don't even know it until something kind of happens in your life to ignite that spark to say, wait a minute, who am I? And so as you begin to answer those questions, it may even take you, I think I was watching something, or I was talking to someone, and they were telling me that there was this woman and she was trying to discover more about herself. And so she made eggs like several different kinds of ways just to see, which type of eggs are her favorite, And so being able to take those kinds of steps to say, what is it that I like? Do I like to go on drives? Am I just doing it because other people expect that from me, or because I've gotten into routine of doing those things? And so we challenge our students to do that as well, in order for them to be able to fully cultivate the treasure that's within them. And so when we say, see yourself, even if the world is blind, even if people can't see who you are, even if people misunderstand or misinterpret who you are, you have to get to a place, because a cage-free mindset is a mindset where you are able to be free despite the boundaries that other people try to put around you, or the cages that other people try to put around you. It's like being in a prison cell, but still freeing your mind to be all of who you are created to be. And so testing out certain things about yourself, I read the Word of God, and I pray a lot, and I meditate on the Word of God for myself, and that helps me in the process. And we also incorporate that's embedded into a lot of our content as well for our students. But I think that the biggest thing is being honest about your good, your bad, and your ugly. It's not just about embracing the good about yourself, but it's embracing the fact that I had to come to a place where I was like, this is what I do when I get frustrated. This is what I do when I'm upset, and that's okay, because that's Bathsheba, and not being afraid or feeling like I have to deny those things about myself, but being honest about them so I can actually grow in those areas. And I'm all about growth rather than improvement, because improvement is focused more on what your deficits or what you feel your weaknesses are, whereas growth is more focused on how can I get to the next step in my development.
Amazing. One of the things we were chatting about before we hit record was sort of about Edtech and your sort of focus on that. Do you want to talk me through a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, When I first, before COVID even came around, before this whole pandemic hit, I started Cage Free Voices tutoring. It was not Cage Free Voices online learning, and so I had students coming into my home, and I was also working within the public school system, and I have been working in education for over 15 years. Oh my gosh, I'm telling my age. so, so for like over 15 years, and I felt compelled to take that information and what I was learning about my students and creating these diverse profiles of my students online so that other students will have access to the same information, and so that I could reach more kids, not just in kindergarten, the elementary school grades, but also all the way up to 18 plus, because I've had conversations with adults who say, adults, we need to be cage free too. We need help too. And so those professional development programs and in educational technology, being able to take the blended learning model. And I spent some time in adult education working with a blended learning model while I was building out Cage Free Voices. So I knew that it was going to kind of be cutting edge, so to speak, and also that we were on the brink of this major shift and paradigm shift in how we look at education. So as I was doing that in adult education, I was also building out my model for Cage Free Voices and understanding that blended learning is the way to go. And being able to reach, and I have so many different ideas about where educational technology is going to go in the future. We're talking virtual reality. We're talking about just, being able to reach diverse learning styles in ways that we could not have imagined before. And so we are working on making sure that we can enhance the learning process for our students through educational technology, and by way of reaching those 9 different types of intelligences. And one of which is, that major piece that all of our students are caught up in, YouTube and social media. That's the music. Music is a major component, and a lot of our students are musical learners. And so we really highlight that in the content that we deliver.
Great. And how easy do you think it is for the technical changes that have happened over the last year? How easy do you think it is for schools to implement these changes, as well as sort of ensuring well-being for staff and students?
Well, I have actually experienced the process. And so being in the public school system and witnessing it was more reactionary as opposed to being proactive about, planning and being prepared for such a time as this. And as a result of it being reactionary, a student suffered, parents, learning partners suffered, and especially teachers and administrators, because you have the digital learning divide as well. So when you have young students who have deficits in certain areas, or even if you have like like a third grader who does not have the digital literacy in order for them to be able to use the technology, then that becomes a major issue academically, because they can't keep up with the pace of the class. They don't have time to respond to the questions. And then you have the blending of different types of educational technology or different types of educational software, which frustrated a lot of people who were trying to learn the different software at a rapid pace. So all at the same time. And so I experienced some of that myself, and just, having to go through like professional development in like 3 hours and going over 3 different systems in a matter of 3 hours, while also trying to integrate a grade book and everything else, which is why we have really made our system as seamless as we can, so students don't have to go into multiple programs. And as a result of not being prepared, the multiple programs presented several different issues. And I think that prior to the pandemic or pre-pandemic, we already had students who were significantly behind. And so having that digital divide, not having access to different devices, we experienced where, they had to figure out how we're going to get all these computers to students. How are we going to get those computers to students who don't have access to computers? And even, how do we get the internet connection for some of those students who don't have access to the internet? And so you have this major chasm between the students who have access and the students who do not have access, as well as the administrators and the teachers trying to figure out how to navigate all of it while also trying to figure out how to use different types of software. And for me, I can't imagine what it would have been like for an older adult who's not used to using technology, being used to using chalkboard instruction, or just being able to use lecture style type of instruction, getting onto an online learning platform and not knowing how to use anything. And that, I watched that people had meltdowns and everything else. And so that shift has left our students, I think, we're going to be in for a rude awakening when it comes to 2022 and students are fully back in school. We're going to have to make up for some significant gaps because a lot of those students were already behind. And now, in addition to the social issue, we have to deal with mental health challenges. And we have to deal with the fact that, everybody was trying to figure out how to, grade students and where to give grace, and should we push them or just let them pass as a result of them dealing with all of the, social, economic, and political issues that surmounted during that time.
I know, I think, there was a lot of bad about the pandemic, and certainly, you've explained some of it there. But I think one of the positive things is it has very much shone a light on the discrepancies, I think, between those that have and those that have not. And then some of the, sort of issues about special educational needs, the issues that are very easy to ignore when everything's okay. But when, you're having to push everything online, I think that's all very much come to the fore a lot more.
I think you're absolutely correct. And I actually had a new team member say, I think I've taken for granted the relationships that I have with students, or the relationships I have with my team members, working in the public school setting, because I relied on those things as opposed to actually being able to, incorporate what was needed into the content that students, require. And so I think it definitely has shined a light on where we have disparities, and it has definitely propelled us in this area of, because education, Edtech is happening. It's happening. And while technology has been progressing over time, we have in the educational industry kind of dragged our feet in this area, and the pandemic pushed us and said, okay, it's time for us to make these necessary changes. And it allows for those students who are gamers, who you see my gaming headset, right? Who are gamers, to learn in a different way versus being in front of a dry erase board or a chalkboard. Those are all positive realities for us, especially, we're reaping the benefits here at Cage Free Voices to be able to see students grow and thrive using technology, because that's the space and the era that we're in.
And what are your predictions for the future of EdTech? I mean, a lot of people have talked about sort of distance learning, hybrid learning. Obviously that will continue, but is there anything else you think is likely to happen in the following year?
I think that online learning is not going anywhere. I also think brick and mortar establishments, like in terms of schools, aren't going anywhere. So I think that you're going to see a combination. Some parents are starting. Oh, this is one piece that I did not get to discuss, and that is because of students being more online, they've been protected from issues of, in-person bullying and having to deal with that. And so some parents are going to start, or learning partners are going to start to, say, hey, I like this experience of my child being home. There's a benefit to that. And so you're going to see a wave of students learning from home. Even when everything opens back up, those students are going to stay home, and you're going to see families growing because they're able to spend more time with their children because they're at home. But you're also going to see those students who are parents who want to send their students back into the school. You're going to see this combination of like this blended learning model that has already begun, the hybrid learning model. And that's something that we started in adult education, where we would have students, adult learners, go from a workshop model to connecting that curriculum content with online learning for them. And so we're going to start seeing that hybrid model even more, where, those students who are at home are able to still learn through the teacher while their teacher is in the classroom teaching the students who are present in person. And so I think that's going to continue. It's not going to be something that, ceases to exist because the pandemic has subsided. I also think that we're going to start to see more incorporation of virtual technology. We're going to see virtual reality as a part of the educational process, because we look at YouTube. I mean, just look at YouTube and how quickly our kids learn from YouTube, or even video games, and being able to be on video games and have that, not just the visual learning piece, but kinesthetic learning with the Oculus, like being able to play while you learn. I see that as being a part of the change that is already starting to happen. We're long gone are the days of us, just being able to be in front of a board and provide a lecture. We're going to start to see some of that virtual reality come in person, and also while people are at home.
So you touched on cage-free voices earlier. Why don't you tell us a bit more about that, and a bit more about what you enjoy about your role as CEO?
I think what I enjoy most, well, I'll say a little bit about Cage-Free Voices. We're all about building families and building people. And so, yes, we do academics. Yes, we do, all the entertainment stuff. We have Cage-Free Voices Theater, Cage-Free Voices Radio, Cage-Free Voices Online Learning. We bring all of that together. But the ultimate goal is to build people. And so I enjoy seeing the responses of our students, of the learning partners, and our team members, and watching that growth take place. When a child has that aha moment, or a team member has that aha moment, to be able to, it's like being able to watch a caterpillar transform. That's the best part of being like the CEO of Cage-Free Voices, is watching that transformation take place, where you see the starting point and where a child starts as a caterpillar. It's not just about, oh, you move to reading levels, or you have an A in math now, but it's being able to see them go from this caterpillar status to now you're in the chrysalis, and now you're emerging out of that, and I see your beautiful wings, and you know what your purpose is, and you're definitely certain about a few things while you may be uncertain about others. And so watching that process is beauty in and of itself, and I enjoy that. That's the best part of it. That's the best part.
And could you tell me about a career low, how you overcame it, and what you learned from it?
So when I first started Cage-Free Voices tutoring, I had not anticipated, as I began to make the transition online, how many parents, or how quickly we would turn over students in terms of their reading levels. And so when students were growing so quickly, parents would just pull their kids right out the program, like they've achieved the goal. So let's just, we don't need services anymore. And we've had some of those parents return, realizing they need to keep their child in a rhythm. But I did not anticipate that starting off. And so consequently, we suffered financially because we had so much of a turnover and I did not plan for it. I learned, and then we also had parents who were reluctant to having their children online. They wanted their children to be in person. And so I didn't count for that. And as a result of not, taking that into consideration, that impacted us financially as well. And so now I'm always thinking at least 6 months to a year ahead, and what the potential issues, or just coming up with various strategies to counteract any issues that may arise as a result of some of the decision making that takes place within Cage-Free Voices.
And then what would you tell us about a career high you've had? What would you say that would be?
I think career high. I think that would be now. I think that would be now. Seeing, for a long time as I kind of traverse this landscape of, educational technology, blended learning, and people not completely being on board with it and thinking, what are you talking about? What the heck is Cage-Free Voices? This is crazy. So moving past that to a place where people understand the necessity of incorporating the performing arts and other learning modalities into the process. It's a career high for me right now, because now people see the importance of the change and the need, and also they are starting to ride the wave and understanding that this transition must take place. So that's a high for me, because I would love to see more adults, more students, teenagers, everyone become cage-free and see themselves even if the world is blind.
Amazing. And one thing we ask everyone who we speak to is, if you weren't doing the job you are now, so CEO of Cage-Free Voices, what would you choose to be?
Well, I'm a performer, so
yeah.
I would certainly be on BET, MTV, or Broadway. So I still have those dreams of being somehow. Actually, I had a performance a couple of years ago where someone said, they wouldn't be surprised if I was, I was a Tony Award winner for Broadway, my one woman show on Broadway. And so that kind of like really had me stoked, and I was excited about it. And, Cage-Free Voices Theater was birthed out of that. I still have the desire to, perform my music for myself. And so at some point, once Cage-Free Voices is running seamlessly and it's like a well-oiled machine, because I know that is a priority, then, I'll be, you might see me on BET or MTV or Broadway somewhere doing my thing, and still being able to use that same content for Cage-Free Voices, just like, Hamilton is used in schools.
Brilliant. I mean, what an aspiration to have, and hopefully we will see you on the stage at some point. And the other question is, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
Go for it. Don't wait. I would tell my younger self to go for it. When I was younger, I was too focused on my surroundings. Like I said, that I grew up in poverty. And so I had all of these visions and ideas about different inventions and what I would do when I was older. And that started at a very young age. But I kind of second guessed myself because I was hung up on wanting to ensure that I would never be poor again. And so I made some career choices. You can see, I don't know if you can see the not degree, but the award in the background,
yeah.
Where, my actual master's degree is in health systems management with a concentration in health policy. My undergrad is in biology, and people are like, what in the world? And I initially went to school to become a doctor.
Wow, okay.
And the only reason that I went to school to become a doctor was because I wanted to make a lot of money, you know? And so that's where, you know, that truth that comes out about see yourself, even if the world is blind. It's about being honest, you know, because you don't know where your true self will take you. And so I had all of these ideas of what could possibly happen if I was honest about the fact that, you know, I was always teaching when I was little. I would have, you know, my brothers and my sister lined up outside in front of our little project apartment with pencils and paper, and I would teach them, and then I would read them stories at night that I had written. And I wasn't honest about that with myself because I thought that that path would not lead to a place where I could be free from my external circumstances. And so I said, let me pick a different path and just, you know, hurry up and make some money. So I think that like now just being in this educational sphere and being able to do what it is that I like to do, being able to use music and everything else, I'm still being true to who I am. And, you know, I'm free to do that. And so I'm hoping I answered your question because I kind of got off track a little bit.
No, it does, definitely. And where do you see the future of education, and what do you hope for in the future?
Oh, that's so loaded. I I hope to see a world where we learn from each other, and it's not just I have all the answers and you students and you young people, you need to learn from me and that's it. Because I think that the process is it's not one-sided. It's where we can learn from young people, and young people can teach one another. You know, I think that the most young people are impressionable when they're younger, and when young people are impressionable when they're younger. Young people are impressionable when they're at a certain age, middle school, high school, and they listen to their peers more than anyone else. And so why not encourage our young people to teach each other and find creative ways to do that, and to also teach us so that we can be effective in our classes, to be effective online, to be effective with the students that we serve. I always say that, you know, an educator is a financial manager. We teach students to manage the wealth they already possess. And so if we teach them how to manage that wealth, then we'll see a world where it's not just, you know, adults doing the teaching, but we're all learning from one another. And that can happen not just through, you know, one-on-one sessions or, you know, in-person instruction, but also online.
Great. And if people want to find out more about Cage Free Voices, where's the best place for them to go?
They can go to CFV, that's C as in cage, F as in free, V as in voices, onlinelearning.com.
Brilliant.
CFVonlinelearning.com.
Oh, that was amazing. It's been so lovely to talk to you.
It's been great talking to you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining this week's GESScast. Make sure you visit our website, GESSeducation.com, the essential resource for educators, to subscribe to the podcast and to enjoy the latest education news.